Hello and welcome to the Archie Luxury program. Today I'd like to talk about value for money Rolex watches. That's right, and especially sports Rolex watches. Sports Rolex watches are really sort of the hottest type of watch out there in the marketplace. And there's been a lot of models that have been released recently. Rolex has updated to the ceramic type bezel, and they've introduced a larger Explorer 1, a larger Explorer 2, and they've changed some of the key design elements on the Submariner and the GMT. So, you know, I think it's a good idea for me, Archie Luxury, to give some advice on what is some good bang per buck Rolex sports watches out there at the moment. And let's have a bit of a look at that. Okay, the genre of sports watches, well, it really came out in the 1950s when Rolex released the first Submariner. And that's when the sports watch in Rolex sort of really took off. Now those 50s Submariners, those 60s Submariners, and any vintage plastic, when I say plastic I'm referring to what the crystal is made of. That's the glass on the watch, and the vintage pieces traditionally use an acrylic, which is a plastic type glass, so that it can scratch easily, but it can buff out. Whereas the newer model Rolex sports watches, they use a sapphire crystal, which is a mineral sapphire. It's like a glass, and it's more scratch resistant. However, it will chip, and no, you can't buff it out. So there's pros and cons to both of them. As far as collectability goes, any plastic sports watch, that's the plastic glass, is very, very collectible, and they're quite a valuable piece. All Rolexes are valuable, of course, but they're especially valuable. And I think on the if you're new to collecting, or if you're a seasoned collector, there's not much bargains in the plastic sports watch range there. They're actually quite very collectible, very you know, they've reached their point there. So I don't think there's much bang per buck in buying that sort of piece on the used market. If you're just an average sort of collector who wants to have some great pieces, I mean, personally, and I've said this a few times, what would you rather have? A more modern Patek Philippe Calatrava, or a Sea Dweller, plastic Sea Dweller, plastic Submariner 1680, that sort of thing? And in my book, I'd rather have the Patek. I think it's good bang per buck. But yeah, that's just to give you a bit of an idea. But I think the best bang per buck is the 90s. You know, that's sort of from the late 80s to till about year 2000. The sports watches in that 10-year period, I think they're the best bang per buck now. Anything sort of post 2000 is going to be, you know, still quite expensive because it's relatively new model. Whereas these pieces from the early 90s to the late 90s, you're talking, those pieces there now are over 10 years old, and they're starting to come down a bit in price, and there's some good bang per buck. The other thing is that these pieces here are really great watches. They've got the sapphire crystal, which I think is a better thing to have, and they've also got a generally speaking quick set dates on the Submariner, and they've got the more refined movements compared to the more vintage models. Now, in my opinion there, I think that really is the best bang per buck type of Rolex sports watches that are out in the marketplace. And let's have a look at that. We'll start by having a look at the Rolex Explorer 1. Now, the Rolex Explorer 1 I know quite intimately because I've owned the plastic version, which is the 1016, which is highly collectible. And I've also had a string of 14270s, which is the sapphire crystal version. And I think an early 90s 14270 is quite a good piece on the used market. You're going to be paying, this is Aussie or US dollars, about the same. You're going to be paying high twos to about the 3.5 mark, and that's pretty good bang per buck. The piece has it's got a sapphire glass, classic simple dial, the 369 classic Explorer dial. It's got an oyster bracelet. Some of the later ones have the flip lock oyster bracelet, and it's just probably the most original type of sports watches, because what it was a very simple waterproof classic piece with a very reliable, accurate movement, certified movement. And the Explorer 1 basically became the Submariner when a bezel was a rotating bezel was fixed to it. So this is the beginning of all sports watches. And the Rolex Explorer 1 these days, as you get an early 90s one, you're going to, they're a bit unloved at the moment, and you know, the price reflects that. They have released a new Explorer 1, which is it's a bigger size, and see the one from the 90s is about 36mm across, just like a Datejust from the same period, whereas the new one is I think it's 39mm, so it has certainly added dimension to it. So bang per buck, that 36mm 14270 is a great piece, classic. It's a gorgeous piece. Some people think it's a smidgen small, but I think that's stupid. I think they're a great Rolex Explorer to have there, and they're just so classic, and it's the sort of piece you can wear with a suit, you can wear you know, with casual, you can wear smart casual, you can wear anywhere. It's just so classic, and it really is the start of all sports watches, the Rolex Explorer 1. So I reckon that's a great bang per buck buy. Next great sports watch is the Rolex Explorer 2. Now the Rolex Explorer 2, the original version came out in the early 70s, and that's a very, very collectible piece. That's the 1655, also known as the Orange Hand. Very collectible, very valuable piece. But the sapphire versions, they came out in the mid to late 80s, and it was a 16550, and they're actually more valuable than the 16570, and the 16550 had a very rare anomaly, which had it was available with an ivory dial, whereas the other ones are white or black dial. And let's talk about the bang per buck one. So I'd really recommend the early 90s Explorer 2 up until the late 90s, and that'll be a 16570, available with a white dial or a black dial. The later model ones had the flip lock bracelet, and they also had the no holes case. Personally, I actually like the holes case, and I like the traditional oyster bracelet, but you're actually going to pay more for the no holes case with the flip lock bracelet. But I think they're a fantastic watch. It's a GMT piece, which means it gives you 2 time zones. And it's a 24-hour second hand that goes around the piece. It's just a great watch there, and the thing about the Explorer 2 is, because it has the fixed steel bezel with the 24-hour markers on it, it gives it a really nice masculine appearance. And I think I've always been a great fan of the Explorer 2. I think they're a great watch, great bang per buck. What are you going to pay? Well, these would have to be the biggest bargain of the time. You're going to be paying low threes up to about 4 for that sort of piece, and I think that's an absolute bargain. And Explorer 2 is a little bit unloved. It's strange, when the GMT ceramic came out, the Explorer 2 sort of went off out of flavour, but I can remember going back to the late 90s. Explorer 2 was very popular models. Almost, it was never as popular as the Sub, but it was sort of as valuable as the Sub, and they've dropped a bit, but great bang per buck buy. Which is better, white or black? Well, I've actually got the white one. Many people like the black one. I think it just depends. I don't think you can go wrong either way, white or black dial. They're a great buy. And for that money, for $3,000 to $4,000 for a Rolex sports watch GMT type piece, I think that's a fucking bargain. So that's the Rolex Explorer 2, really good bargain there. Okay, the next piece I want to talk about is the Rolex Submariner, and in that same genre, we'll include the Sea Dweller. And the Submariner itself, there you've got a choice. If we're talking about pieces from the early 90s to the late 90s, you've got the no date, that's the 14060. You've also got the traditional Submariner with date, that's the 16610. You can also throw in the two-tone version, the 16613, which is, it's a great two-tone combination. Two-tone doesn't seem to be as popular as the steel models retain more they retain more than the two-tone versions, but that's just the fifth. That's how fickle two-tone is at times. But those are great pieces, and I don't think you can do wrong. Explorer 2, I think, is a better bang per buck piece, but a no date Sub is going to be about the 3 to 4 mark. That's for a Sapphire 14060. A 16610, you'll be paying over the 4,000 mark, depending on box papers and condition of the piece. But that's not bad buying. And the Sea Dweller, the Sapphire Sea Dweller, is a smidgen more, and that's really quite a fantastic watch. Sea Dweller itself, Sapphire Sea Dweller, I think it's a hell of a lot more attractive than the Deep Sea, which replaced it. And I think the traditional Sea Dwellers are going to be, the Sapphire Sea Dwellers are going to be very collectible in the next 20 years to come. So I think they're a great piece to buy. And Sea Dwellers, you can get a good Sapphire Sea Dweller just over the 4.5 to 5 mark. So that's not bad bang per buck either. The Sea Dweller itself is it's fairly hefty, chunky watch, solid end links. It had a lot of firsts in it, which they filtered through to the other sports watches. But the Sea Dweller itself, it's a great piece. I must say, I've always been a huge fan of the no date Sub. That's the 14070. Sorry, 060, I should say. And it's a fantastic piece, the no date Sub. It's got the same simplicity as the Explorer 1. It's got that beautiful clean dial without the date, and I think they're a great piece to have there. The mind you, with a Submariner date, you really can't do any wrong. That's probably the most classic sports Rolex there is. The Submariner date in steel, classic piece. And now it's probably the hottest watch on the market there. But you get a 90s one, and you're going to get good bang per buck. And I don't think you can really lose much on a gorgeous piece like that. So that's the Rolex Submariner and Sea Dweller range. Great bang per buck for all of those pieces. Okay, the final piece in the Rolex sports range from the early 90s to the late 90s is the GMT. And the GMT itself there, they've had the new incarnation with the ceramic bezel. But the beautiful thing about the GMT is, from the early 90s to the late 90s, the GMT was one of the pieces which it lost its plastic glass later. It lost it in the mid 80s. So it certainly it held on to that plastic glass for a while. But the thing is that the GMTs themselves, they're very similar as far as the movement and functionality and the crown to the Explorer 2. The new Explorer 2 is actually quite a bit different. It's a bigger size, and they've changed some of the key elements to it. But the GMT and the Explorer 2, they share a lot in common. And you've got that rotating bezel, so you've got the extra time zones you can work out with it, because it is so flexible. And they're a great piece. The GMT, you really can't do any wrong with the GMT. Pepsi refers to the black and the red. So the Pepsi is the blue and the red, and the Coke is the black and the red. And they're just such a great Rolex to have the GMT, and I think, you know, those sort of pieces they're actually a bit higher than the Explorer 2, and I think the Explorer 2 is a better buy. But a GMT 2 on the used market, there you're going to be paying high threes to about $4,500, which, you know, for a Rolex sports watch, that's pretty good. You know, pretty good pricing there. And you've got the sapphire crystal on it. You've got a flip lock bracelet generally. Some of the earlier versions had the oyster bracelet, but you get the flip lock bracelet on the later ones, and they're really a fantastic sports Rolex to have. And I think the GMT itself there, I'd personally be going for an Explorer 2. I think they're a little bit better, but as far as bang per buck goes, but if you can get a GMT at the right money, that's a beautiful piece to have in your collection. I'm Archie Luxury, and I hope you've enjoyed this series on Rolex sports watches. See you later.